Have you ever, scrolled through your phone, maybe using your favorite app, and then just stopped for a second and wonder, where does all my stuff actually go? And maybe more importantly, once you've clicked agree on those terms and conditions nobody ever reads, who really owns that information? For a lot of us, I think it feels a bit like looking into a black box. There's this uncertainty about our own digital footprint and maybe a feeling of losing control.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a fundamental question, isn't it? And honestly, it's probably one of the most critical ones of our time, digitally speaking.
Yeah.
And for way too long, the answer has been, well, let's just say less than ideal for the individual users.
Yes.
It's exactly that feeling that leads to this sense of information overload, this idea that our data is just out there being used in ways we don't fully get or maybe didn't even agree to. It really throws a spotlight on the huge power imbalance that kind of defines our online world right now. We're always putting data in, but rarely seem to get the direct benefit back.
Exactly, that feeling of, disempowerment. And that's precisely what we're going to dive into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to sort of pull back the curtain on how internet apps have traditionally worked. And then the really exciting part, introduce you to a pretty revolutionary new concept, the small data network. And this isn't just a small tweak, it's really a fundamental rethink of our whole relationship with data. It promises to shake things up from how apps get built to, frankly, who holds the reins.
Yeah, we're going to unpack the way things work now, introduce the key players in this emerging new picture, and really explore the profound implications. What does it mean to shift from a system that's often centralized and, let's be honest, pretty opaque, to one that's genuinely distributed and puts the user first? We've been thinking through a stack of really insightful articles and some groundbreaking reports that paint a clear picture of these two very distinct approaches. Our aim here is to make sure you walk away from this deep dive not just knowing about it, but really getting it, with a clear view of where data might be headed and, crucially, your place in all of it.
Yeah, think of this as your shortcut to understanding what could be a major digital revolution in the making. We've done the legwork, pulled out the most important bits, and now we're here to, guide you through this fascinating and, honestly, quite complex landscape. Okay, so let's start on familiar ground first. Most of us, whether we really think about it this way or not, are living and breathing and clicking inside what our sources call the big data paradigm. It's, the standard model we've all just sort of grown up with online. It's the bedrock for so many of the apps and services we use every single day. But what does that actually look like when we're using an app? How does that centralized thing really play out in our digital lives?
Well, a good way to picture it is like a giant central fortress. Seriously, that's pretty much the big data model we've all been operating under. All the roads, all the streams of information, they all lead directly to the service provider's own data centers. Think about any big app you use, social media, online shopping, streaming services, whatever. Every single one is busy collecting and storing your data in its own massive private vault. It's inherently centralized. Fundamentally, it's the exact opposite of a distributed system. When you interact with one of these huge global platforms, your data isn't spread out. No, it's being funneled, siphoned right into their gigantic single database.
Right. So if I post a photo or search for something or even just, scroll through a feed, my data isn't staying local. It's not mine anymore, really. It's all flowing to these central fortresses. Can you maybe walk us through how that data flow actually works? Because it really does sound like a one-way street. We just keep giving.
That's exactly the dynamic. You, the user. And this applies whether you're just a regular person, a small business, or even a huge corporation. You interact with an application. And as you click, type, watch, whatever, data is constantly being generated. And we're not just talking about the obvious stuff like the content you create. It's your clicks, your search terms, your preferences, your location, how long you pause on something, even what device you're using. All of that, this whole digital exhaust, it moves from you across the internet and straight into the application provider's private data centers. It's like a continuous, unbroken river flowing straight into their control, piling up into what we often call data silos. Each company effectively builds its own enormous data mountain, mostly walled off from other companies and definitely walled off from you, the person who actually created the data in the first place.
Wow. It's actually kind of mind-boggling when you think about the sheer amount of data being collected, like every single second. But what's the real why behind it all? Why this massive constant collection? Is it just about making the apps work a bit better, or is there something deeper, more commercial driving it?
Well, making apps work better is definitely the line you hear, and there's some truth to it, of course. But the primary driver, it's much broader and, yeah, absolutely profit-driven. The main goal of all this relentless data gathering is to improve the provider's own services, yes, but more specifically, it's about optimizing their applications, personalizing experiences for their users in ways that make you stick around longer, click more. And ultimately, all of that drives increased profitability for that specific company. It's about making their product more addictive, more sticky, more indispensable, basically, by understanding every little thing about how you behave online. That knowledge lets them fine-tune everything, target ads with scary precision, predict what you might do next, and kind of lock you into their world. It's a direct, undeniable link straight to their bottom line. Your data becomes their strategic asset, not yours.
Okay, and this is where it gets, really interesting and maybe a bit uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially when we start thinking about privacy, about personal autonomy, what about ownership? In this big data world, if I'm the one generating all this incredibly valuable data, who actually owns it once it's in their system, do I still have any say at all?
This is probably the most critical point, the thing that really defines the big data paradigm. And yeah, it's where that power imbalance just becomes crystal clear. Essentially, users effectively give up. They cede ownership and control of their data to the application providers. Simple as that. Once your data goes into their system, the standard practice is you relinquish control, period. And here's the kicker. There's no built-in mechanism in this model for you, the individual, to get paid directly for the value your data creates. The value that's squeezed out of your digital life directly benefits the provider. It fuels their business, their analytics, their AI, their profits, not you, the person who actually made that value possible. You can almost picture it, right? Millions of users on one side, these huge central cloud servers on the other, and the arrows. They only point one way from the users into those clouds. It just perfectly shows that one-way flow of value of data ownership. It highlights this fundamental asymmetry. Your time, your attention, your data, it all gets scooped up, pooled together, monetized, but the money trail almost never leads back to you.
Just think about that for a second. Your digital footprint, every little trace you leave online, constantly being gathered, constantly being used, mainly to boost someone else's profits. And all without you having any real say over how it keeps being used or getting any direct compensation for the huge value it clearly has. It's a model that's just become normal.
Yeah.
The background noise of our online lives. But, and this is the crucial point we're getting to, this doesn't have to be the only way. This whole deep dive is about understanding how that old way is being challenged and maybe, just maybe, completely turned on its head. Okay, so now let's completely flip that script. Let's imagine a future that really challenges the foundations of that big data empire we just talked about. Our research keeps pointing to this radical shift, something called the small data network. And like we said, this isn't just, polishing the old system. It feels like a truly fundamental reimagining. How does this actually change how internet applications work compared to that centralized data hoarding model we're all so used to?
It's a total reimagining, like you said, a complete paradigm shift. The small data network basically moves us away from that centralized, often murky model where all the power is concentrated. It moves us toward the model that's inherently distributed, transparent, and genuinely collaborative. So instead of one single massive central vault where all the data ends up, picture an interconnected web, like a network where control, this is the key part, ownership are decentralized. Spread out, this basically distributes power and responsibility across loads of individual entities, and that includes you, the user. The core idea is getting away from providers just collecting data into their centers and moving towards an open, interoperable networked ecosystem. An ecosystem where multiple data centers, owned by individuals, owned by businesses, can actually connect and interact directly.
Okay, so it's not one giant database owned by one company anymore. It's more like lots of smaller, separate, but perfectly connected ones. It's almost like going from one huge national library that controls everything to maybe a vast network of independent local libraries.
Right.
Each local library has its own unique collection, but they're all linked by a universal catalog, so you can find and borrow stuff from anywhere. And that helps make sense of the name small data, doesn't it? It's not that the data itself is tiny, but the control points, the individual centers, are smaller and more numerous.
Exactly, that's a great analogy. The small data network isn't really about the volume of information. It doesn't mean tiny data sets, no. It refers to the individual data center, the node in the network, which is owned and controlled by the individual user or the company. But the real power of this whole model comes from each small node being part of a much, much larger interconnected system. Each data center, even though it's individually owned and managed, could still hold vast amounts of data. The network itself as a whole contains an immense amount of data, maybe even more than the big data silos, but it's distributed among all these individual connected small data centers. And this collaborative nature means the interconnected system, the whole thing together, is potentially way more resilient and valuable than any single isolated proprietary database could ever be. It's a massive shift from hoarding data to sharing it, but critically sharing it on your terms.
That paints a really powerful picture, and honestly, a pretty hopeful one too. So what's the grand vision then? What's the ultimate purpose behind actually building out this small data network idea? What are its main goals? What problem is it really trying to fix for us?
Well, the overarching purpose, and this comes through really clearly in the research, is to fundamentally redefine how data flows, how applications are built, how we collaborate online. And to do all that while building an internet that's genuinely secure and puts privacy right at the center, not as an afterthought. It's really about creating an internet of the future, where the user is, without any doubt, the central figure, not just some peripheral source of raw material. And to get to that ambitious vision, there are several specific and honestly pretty revolutionary objectives laid out. First, and this is probably the biggest game changer, it's about returning control to data owners. Full stop. This paradigm explicitly empowers you, whether you're just using your phone or you're a big company, to keep full ownership and real robust control over your information. You are definitively back in the driver's seat. You set the terms for how your data is used, you define who gets access, and you ensure it's shared securely and under your conditions. This is a total flip from the big data model. You decide how, when, by whom, and under exactly what conditions your data gets used. And that control is meant to be granular, built right into the system's design. It's not just a policy statement, it's architectural. Second, the goal is to create a truly collaborative ecosystem. By linking up all these previously isolated data centers, yours, mine, a company's looking, it actively encourages innovation that's currently stuck because of these proprietary data silos. Service providers, the app developers, instead of just hoarding their own limited data, they could potentially access a vastly richer diversity of data sets from across the whole network. This idea of shared access instead of exclusive hoarding, well, it just opens up completely new ways to build applications, to find insights, things that were impossible before. Just imagine the creative explosion when data from totally different sources can be brought together ethically and with consent. Third, and this is really important for the long haul, for the health of our digital world, it directly tackles the need to overcome big data limitations. Think about it. The constant, unsustainable growth of these massive, isolated big data centers causes real problems. Single points of failure, huge energy consumption, the massive cost of just maintaining these ever-growing private systems. The small data network, by connecting all these individual facilities into a distributed web, inherently creates a more robust, more resilient, and actually more sustainable architecture. It spreads the load, it enhances security because it's decentralized, and it can even reduce the environmental impact compared to these giant monolithic data centers. Fourth, and this is a really big one for users, it's about establishing a fair data market. This model explicitly introduces real mechanisms for fair compensation. Service providers pay data owners for accessing and using their data. And these payments aren't just tacked on, they're designed to be integrated right into the network protocols themselves, automatically. Your data have actual quantifiable value, and in this model, you get to claim your slice of that value directly and automatically. This moves us decisively away from that old extractive model where your data is just free for the taking.
You could imagine, maybe, micropayments happening through blockchain or smart contracts, where every time your data is accessed with permission, a tiny bit of value flows back to you, automatically. Fifth, ensuring quality and reliability is absolutely key. Just because it's spread out doesn't mean it's the Wild West. Through the crucial role of data network operators, which we'll get into next, the system is designed to maintain order, consistency, and high data quality across the whole ecosystem. These operators act like stewards, setting clear rules, monitoring how things are working, enforcing standards, making sure the network stays trustworthy and efficient for everybody involved. And finally, number 6, it aims to strengthen data's role in the whole digital landscape. With smart layers, like this NetX thing we'll talk about later, data shifts from being just a passive resource sitting there to being a dynamic, active backbone of the digital economy. Things like proactive discovery allow for a much more advanced digital ecosystem where data becomes a living, breathing, accessible element that applications can find in real time. This leads to much smarter, more responsive services.
It really defines a whole new era for how we interact with information and how we benefit from it.
Okay, this is a really ambitious vision, incredibly complex, and for it to actually work, everyone involved needs to know exactly what their role is, what they're responsible for. So in this new world, you, the individual user or the company, you're not just a source anymore. You become an empowered data owner. What does that actually mean? What does that involve for people and organizations stepping into this new role?
Yeah, this role, the data owner, it's absolutely foundational. It represents that complete flip of the big data model we talked about. Data owners are the originators, the creators, and the ultimate controllers of information. This includes both individuals like you and me and also enterprise users like businesses. Their position is central, and it empowers them in ways we just haven't really seen before online. So their key responsibilities start with full ownership and control. Unlike the big data way where you effectively give your data away, here, data owners keep ultimate authority over their information. This is the fundamental shift, You decide how, when, by whom, and under precisely what conditions your data gets used. Think of it like having a digital deed, a title for your data, giving you both the legal and the technical power to dictate who gets access and why. Next up, they're responsible for data collection and preparation. This means actively gathering, organizing, and preparing their data within their own local data centers, or maybe personal data stores. Think of it like managing your own digital assets right at the source, curating your personal or your company's information deliberately.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you need a server farm in your basement. It could be a secure personal cloud account, or maybe a dedicated local device like a small box in your home that manages your data securely. Then a really important piece that gives this control real teeth is defining interoperability protocols. Data owners get to set the specific conditions, the rules for how their data can be accessed and processed. These protocols are like a custom set of instructions you attach to your data. You can use this for medical research, but only anonymized and only for 6 months, that kind of thing. This is how you protect your privacy, maintain ethical standards, and make sure third parties use your data responsibly. You set the boundaries, you define the terms, ensuring your data is used exactly how you want it to be. Maybe even enforced automatically using things like smart contracts on a blockchain. They also engage in controlled sharing. So data owners securely share data with service providers, but critically, it's sharing with purpose and permission, not just opening the floodgates.
This allows apps to get the data they need to function, but ensures that any exchange is mutually beneficial and explicitly agreed upon, often, as we said, involving direct compensation. And to encourage flexibility and choice, they're involved in integrating third-party applications. This means your personal data space, or your company's data space, isn't locked into just one provider's ecosystem. No, it's open to innovation from different developers. This increases utility and choice for you. You could grant different apps access to different bits of your data for specific tasks without ever handing over the keys to the entire kingdom. And finally, crucially, data owners are actively seeking financial compensation. They participate in that fair data market we mentioned, receiving payment from service providers for allowing their data to be used. Your data becomes a real monetizable asset, and you, the owner, are the direct beneficiary. This isn't just a nice idea. It's designed right into the core principles of the network, ensuring that the value you create actually flows back to you.
Wow. So the data owner goes from being this passive, often kind of exploited source of data to being an active manager, a sovereign controller, and even someone who can earn money from their own digital assets. That's a massive shift in empowerment. And frankly, it opens up real economic opportunities for individuals and businesses too. It completely redefines what it means to be part of a digital economy. Okay, but with potentially millions of individual data owners, each with their own data center, their own rules, it sounds like this network could get really complicated really fast, like a tangled mess. How does it stay coherent? How does it stay reliable and actually usable without just falling into chaos? That's where these data network operators come in, isn't it? They're kind of the unsung heroes, the architects behind the scenes.
Absolutely, you nailed it. The data network operators are the essential facilitators, the guardians, you could say, of this whole distributed ecosystem. Their job is nothing less than making sure the network functions smoothly, in an orderly way, and reliably. You can definitely think of them as the glue holding this whole distributed system together, providing the vital infrastructure and the oversight needed. So their number one job is network interconnection. They're the ones physically, or rather digitally, linking up all the different data owner centers to actually create the small data network fabric. Picture them as the civil engineers designing and building the huge network of digital highways, bridges, and junctions that connect all the individual data hubs into one cohesive, navigable system. Without them, you'd just have a bunch of isolated islands of data. They're also absolutely crucial for data discovery and cataloging. I mean, in a network with potentially millions of data centers, how on earth do you find the specific data you need for your app? The operators discover, they evaluate, and they catalog the available data sources across the entire network, bringing order and consistency. You could think of them as the grand librarians, but maybe more like the architects of a massive distributed library catalog. They not only curate the knowledge base, but also build the universal index and the search tools that make all that distributed information discoverable and understandable for the service providers. Another absolutely vital responsibility is protocol and quality maintenance. They maintain those interoperability protocols, that common language, that set of rules for how data gets exchanged fairly and securely across the network. They also help establish agreement on data quality standards. They monitor network performance and they enforce those standards. This is critical because just because the network is distributed doesn't mean you sacrifice integrity or reliability. Quite the opposite. They act as a quality control, maybe even a kind of regulatory body, ensuring the whole system remains trustworthy. This could involve defining standards for data formats, minimum security levels, or even the templates for the smart contracts governing data access. They also manage information routing, basically providing the necessary directions for efficient data access by the service providers. Think of them as the air traffic control or the GPS system for the data network. They guide the data requests, making sure they reach the exact right data owners quickly and efficiently, avoiding unnecessary detours or bottlenecks. And lastly, they're responsible for feedback collection and continuous improvement. They need to be constantly listening, constantly adapting, gathering input from both data owners and service providers to make sure the network evolves, stays sustainable, and keeps meeting the needs of everyone involved as technology changes.
Okay, so the data network operators are the orchestrators, the essential glue ensuring trust, efficiency, discoverability across all these individual data owners. It's a complex role, definitely, but absolutely vital if the promise of the small data network is actually going to be realized at scale. And then, of course, the third key group, the service providers. These are the folks actually building the applications we use every day, the innovators, the companies making the tools and services. How do their roles and responsibilities change in this new small data network world compared to their big data counterparts who historically just tried to collect absolutely everything they could get their hands on?
Right, so in this new model, the service providers, they shift from being primarily data hoarders to being intelligent data consumers. Their core job is still to develop and offer innovative applications to us, the end users. But their relationship with data, and fundamentally their business model, gets completely transformed. Their first key responsibility becomes leveraging available data. Instead of feeling like they have to collect and store every single byte of data themselves, they learn to utilize the rich, diverse data that's already available across the network. They use that data to generate valuable results, whether intermediate steps or the final product. They essentially transform raw data, which is owned and controlled by others, into useful products and services. And this actually encourages them to be way more precise, more ethical, and more respectful in their data requests. They only ask for what they genuinely need for a specific function, rather than just casting a wide net and gathering everything just in case. Now here's a really significant shift, something that deeply impacts their whole operating model: their obligation to pay for use. They must pay usage fees to the data owners for accessing and processing their information. And crucially, as we mentioned, these payment conditions are integrated right into the network protocols. It's automatic. This ensures automatic, transparent, and fair compensation. It's a fundamental change. Data is no longer free for them. It's a valuable resource they acquire through fair, clear, auditable transactions. Often this might be facilitated by distributed ledger tech, like blockchain or smart contracts that just automate the whole payment process seamlessly. They're also responsible for efficient data access. They use those standardized interoperability protocols, the ones maintained by the network operators, to efficiently find and access the specific data sets they need. This gives them clear, streamlined pathways to the data without the enormous burden and expense of building and maintaining those colossal private data collection and storage systems themselves. They just pay for access to the exact data they require precisely when they need it. Furthermore, they have a really important responsibility for protecting data owner rights while they're processing the data. Even as they simplify data integration for their apps, they have to rigorously safeguard the privacy settings and the ethical use terms that were set by the data owners. This means strictly adhering to consent rules, anonymization requirements is specified, usage limitations, all potentially enforced programmatically by the network itself. And finally, their core role is still to deliver results and foster innovation. By providing valuable services to users and generating revenue from those services, they contribute to a broader environment of innovation and collaboration across the entire network. By enabling this fair, liquid market for data, they actually end up spurring more innovation because they can tap into a richer, more diverse, and ethically sourced pool of data than they ever could have dreamed of by relying only on their own limited private collections back in the big data days. It really becomes about building value with data owners, not just from them.
So the service provider basically becomes an engine of innovation, yes, but one that's fueled by fair transactions and genuine collaboration, not just data extraction. It sounds like a truly symbiotic ecosystem where value is exchanged, respected, and rewarded, not just taken. It's a profound shift in how digital business could operate, requiring a whole new look at fundamental business models.
Okay, let's zoom in a bit more on the practical side of things. How do the actual applications we use get their work done in this new setup? In the big data world, they're basically fed by these huge internal data lakes, right? Closed systems. How exactly are services fulfilled by the small data network? What's the real operational difference day to day?
Yeah, the fulfillment model changes drastically. In this new paradigm, service providers aren't solely relying on data they collect themselves and pile up in their own silos. Not anymore. Instead, they tap into this interconnected ecosystem of user-owned data centers, both personal users and businesses. The critical idea here is that application services are fulfilled by the small data network itself. It's the network that provides the fuel. So instead of building their own giant data stockpiles, service providers access the collective intelligence of the entire network. They get data directly from its source, the individual owners, and crucially, under the terms those owners have specified. And the sophisticated access is made possible by using those standardized interoperability protocols we keep mentioning. These protocols are like a universal translator and a digital handshake agreement all in one package. They provide the common language that lets all these different applications talk to individual owner-controlled data centers and pull exactly the data they need smoothly and efficiently. Think of it like a set of well-defined digital APIs, application programming interfaces that are public, agreed upon, ensuring that a request for, say, my anonymized location data for traffic analysis can be understood and fulfilled correctly across totally different systems and owners. This structured approach to data exchange moves way beyond just ad hoc deals. It builds trust through transparency and having common standards.
That makes a lot of sense. Moving from that centralized, kind of opaque approach to one that's distributed and standardized. So the whole purpose of using data changes too, right? It sounds like it's less about just hoarding everything possible for some unknown future use and more about what exactly? What's the driving principle now?
That's absolutely right. While the end goal for service providers still involves improving their services, making them better, the method and the whole philosophy behind it fundamentally shifts. Instead of accumulating enormous amounts of data for potential future uses, that sort of just-in-case mentality we saw in big data service providers now leverage available data from the network very specifically. They use it to generate targeted, valuable results right now. And this naturally encourages them to be much more precise, more ethical, more respectful in what data they ask for. It's about smart utilization, getting exactly the data needed for the task at hand, not just grabbing sheer volume for its own sake. And what's really fascinating is how this more precise approach could actually spark more innovation, maybe even unprecedented innovation. By having ethical, controlled access to a much greater diversity of data sets from across the whole network, providers can potentially do things they could never achieve when they were stuck within their own limited data silos. Just imagine the possibilities when you can draw insights from a truly global, diverse pool of information, combining different perspectives, different types of data, rather than just analyzing your own narrow slice. This could exponentially expand the scope of what's possible in app development, leading to more robust, more personalized, and more ethically sound services.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial point for anyone listening, touching on the financial side again, the money. If data owners are keeping control and sharing data purposefully, how does the compensation actually work? It sounds like this introduces a completely new business model, one that's genuinely transactional, not extractive. That's a world away from the current free data model.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. That's the core of the economic transformation. This paradigm introduces a truly fair data market. A fundamental pillar of the small data network is the explicit requirement. It's not optional that service providers must pay usage fees to data owners for accessing and processing their information. This isn't some extra feature or a gesture of goodwill. It's built right into the core rules, the non-negotiable requirements of how the network operates. So you, the user, you're no longer just a data point to be mined for free. You become a compensated partner in this data economy, finally recognized for the value you actually generate. And what makes this particularly strong and trustworthy is that these payment conditions are integrated directly into the interoperability protocols themselves. This ensures compensation is automatic, it's transparent, and it's fair. Think of it like programmatic escrow, maybe using smart contracts. When an application requests data under certain agreed-upon terms, the payment mechanism is triggered automatically. Funds are transferred to the data owner upon successful authorized data access or processing. It's not an afterthought, it's not subject to manual invoicing or complex negotiations. It's baked right into the fundamental mechanics of how data is exchanged. This guarantees fairness and transparency for everyone involved. It shifts that core financial relationship away from exploitation towards a clear, upfront, value-for-value exchange.
Wow. So no more endless free data for the big platforms. Just because you clicked agree on some incredibly long and confusing terms of service years ago, your data literally becomes a potential source of income for you based on its actual value and how it's used. That's a truly powerful and, well, equitable shift in how value flows in the digital world. The relationship really does move from exploitation to something like genuine and partnership.
And that transformation also profoundly redefines the application's role within this whole ecosystem. An application moves away from being the ultimate data destination, the final bucket, where vast, undifferentiated data sets get dumped. Instead, it becomes more like an intermediary or a consumer of data operating within a much broader network. It transforms into a smart orchestrator. It brings together precise data from various owner-controlled sources for a very specific purpose, processes it efficiently, and then delivers valuable results back to the user or maybe integrates it into another service. It's kind of like a skilled chef who sources the absolute freshest, most specific ingredients from many different local farms, rather than trying to grow everything themselves in their own huge, inefficient garden. And this just reemphasizes that innovation, real innovation, is driven not just by the sheer quantity of data you can hoard, but by the ability to ethically collaborate and access high-quality data from across the entire network. It's all about intelligent, permissioned, and compensated data use, leading to truly breakthrough services that respect user privacy and agency right from the start, by design.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly promising. A genuinely distributed, fair, collaborative data ecosystem where we, the users, finally get control back. But here's a practical question that just jumps out. How do applications actually find the specific data they need in such a potentially vast distributed network? It sounds like it could be like trying to find a needle in, well, thousands of haystacks, even with good cataloging by the operators. That's where this thing called NetX comes into the picture, right?
You've absolutely hit on a crucial point there. This is what takes the small data network concept from just being functional to being potentially revolutionary. Enter NetX. Our research describes NetX as a kind of technological catalyst. It significantly enhances the small data network by adding this layer of intelligence, of dynamism, specifically around discovery. Now, it's important to be clear. NetX isn't a fundamental role in the same way as a data owner or a service provider. It's more like an evolutionary upgrade, a powerful enhancement that really optimizes the whole system. You could think of NetX as the really smart, proactive search engine specifically designed for the small data network. It makes the whole thing far more powerful, more responsive, and more intuitive than just a basic cataloging system could ever be on its own.
Okay, so what's the core innovation then? How does NetX actually change how applications interact with data? It sounds like it goes beyond just pulling data that's already been neatly listed somewhere.
That's exactly its genius. NetX's main innovation is its ability to let applications proactively search for and identify relevant data sources across the entire network. Dynamically, it moves beyond just consuming data that's already available and listed in a catalog. See, in the basic model of the small data network, a service provider would use those interoperability protocols and the routing info from the network operator to find and access data sets that have been explicitly listed or made known. And that process, while efficient, can still be seen as somewhat passive, right? The application queries what it already knows might exist. But with NetX, you introduce a much more dynamic, much more sophisticated mechanism. Applications basically transform from being just consumers into being intelligent data explorers. They can actively seek out new, emerging, highly relevant data sets, maybe even data sets they didn't know existed or weren't explicitly cataloged in a simple, static way. This proactive search capability means applications can be way more agile, more responsive in how they get data. They can essentially intelligently sniff out opportunities to combine unique data sets in real time to solve really complex problems or deliver incredibly personalized services. It's almost like the network itself develops an ability to anticipate needs and suggest relevant data connections.
That sounds like a massive upgrade, moving from just reacting to what's listed to proactively seeking out what's needed or even what might be needed. What's the bigger impact of this intelligent, proactive discovery on the network itself? How does NetX really strengthen that idea of data being a dynamic, living backbone for the digital world?
Well, NetX truly reinforces data's role as that dynamic, interconnected backbone of the whole digital landscape. It makes it real. With NetX, data stops being just a static resource sitting on a shelf waiting to be found. It becomes a living, breathing, accessible, and actively discoverable element that applications can leverage in real time. Imagine data not just as a series of isolated lakes, but more like a vast, constantly flowing river system. NetX acts like the intelligent current within that system, constantly highlighting where different streams could potentially converge to create powerful new insights or services. And this capability is absolutely crucial for fostering a deeper, more sophisticated level of innovation. Seriously. It allows service providers to combine and leverage data sources in completely new ways they might not have even foreseen, leading to the development of far more sophisticated, more personalized, maybe even predictive applications. It really unlocks creativity. It enables complex data mashups and entirely new kinds of services that were just impossible when data was trapped in those isolated silos, or could only be found passively through limited directories. It's about building an internet that's not just connected, but genuinely intelligent, right down to its core data layer.
So NetX isn't just about finding data faster or more efficiently. It's actually about reshaping the future of the internet itself, making it inherently smarter, more adaptive, maybe even predictive. That really is a game changer for how applications could be developed.
Precisely. NetX fundamentally redefines data interoperability, application development, and collaboration across these emerging digital systems. By creating a smarter, much more fluid connection between the demand for data from applications and the supply of data from data owners, NetX is really laying the groundwork for a future internet. An internet that's not just secure and privacy-first by design, which is huge in itself, but also incredibly dynamic and innovative. And this approach, it offers really significant benefits for both sides of that data transaction. Service providers gain enormous efficiency through this intelligent discovery. It could dramatically cut the time and resources they need to find, evaluate, and integrate the right data. And for us, the data owners, it creates even more potential monetization opportunities because our carefully managed, consented data sets can be actively sought out and utilized by a much wider, more diverse range of applications than ever before. It really does look like a win-win, fostering a more vibrant, more economically beneficial, and more ethically sound ecosystem for everyone involved.
That's a fantastic way to put it. So just to sum it up quickly, if the small data network builds the fundamental infrastructure and sets the rules for a fair, collaborative data world, then NetX injects the intelligence and the dynamism that are needed for that ecosystem to actually reach its full potential. It acts as that crucial, intelligent discovery layer that truly optimizes how data is found and used, making the whole network much greater than just the sum of its individual parts.
Exactly. You got it. It's like the brain that makes the whole distributed body move with real purpose and foresight. It ensures the small data network isn't just functional, but truly transformative in how we interact with and how we value our digital world. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was an incredible deep dive into how data could and maybe absolutely should be working for us, not just extracted from us. We've really journeyed from that centralized data hoarding world of big data where our information often felt like this commodity we didn't really own or control, all the way to this truly transformative vision of the small data network. It's a massive shift, not just in technology, but in perspective and definitely in power.
Indeed. We've carefully unpacked how this paradigm shift empowers you, the data owner, putting full ownership and that granular control firmly back in your hands, where it belongs. We've seen how it potentially rewards service providers for genuine innovation, not just data collection, by giving them ethical access to a richer, more diverse data pool. And crucially, it establishes a fair, interconnected ecosystem for exchanging data, all significantly boosted by intelligent layers like NetX. Like you said, this isn't just a minor upgrade, it feels like a fundamental rebalancing of the entire digital economy, baked right into the architecture.
Just think about the implications for your own digital life for a moment. Imagine having real, tangible control over your health data, deciding exactly which doctors or researchers can access which parts of it and for exactly how long, or your financial information, your social media activity, every single piece of your digital self. And not just having control, but actually being fairly compensated for its value when you choose to share it under your own clear, transparent terms. That's such a radical departure from how things work now. It offers a whole new level of personal agency online.
And this isn't just a technical shift, something only for network architects and developers to worry about. No, it's a fundamental rebalancing of power and value right across the global digital economy. It moves us decisively towards an internet where privacy, personal agency, and fair compensation aren't just nice to have buzzwords or things bolted on afterwards. Instead, they're meticulously baked into the very architecture, to the design of how data flows and how it's used. It's really about building trust, transparency, and economic fairness right into the fabric of our online lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something really provocative for you to think about. If this small data network idea really takes hold, if it becomes the norm, and every piece of your personal data becomes a genuine asset that you truly own and can potentially monetize, how might that change the very nature of digital identity itself? How could it redefine what citizenship even means in a world that's hyper-connected yet maybe finally individually controlled in the years ahead?
Yeah, and building on that, consider how this shift could completely redefine what value truly means in the digital realm. It moves it away from just passive consumption, from just being eyeballs on a screen towards active compensated participation. What entirely new industries might spring up, what currently unimaginable innovations could blossom when data is truly liquid, owned by the people who create it, and exchanged within a fair, intelligent, transparent marketplace. It's definitely a future that's still being written, but it's one that holds the promise of putting the individual firmly back at the heart of the digital landscape.
That is definitely a lot to chew on. But hopefully this deep dive has given you a really extensive and hopefully well-informed shortcut into understanding this crucial development in how the internet might work. Until next time, keep digging, keep asking questions, and stay curious.